Good Sunday morning. This is Robert Ricks with the National Weather Service in Slidell with your weekly weather briefing. We're going to focus mainly on the next 2 or 3 days as we're going to trend more towards a typical summer pattern, say Wednesday onward, where we get typical afternoon showers and thunderstorms in scattered fashion. But in the meantime, we have a little bit more of a persistent wet pattern that's underway right now across the Gulf Coast states. And as we've seen for the past 4 days at least now, rainfall has gotten quite extensive, and at times has even caused some flooding in localized locations. So we'll go over that a little bit. And suffice it to say, it's going to be difficult to say what location is going to see the heaviest amount because it has so many variables going on right now. But somebody can see excessive rainfall in localized fashion. And we'll look at that a little bit closer in more detail. Heat index values, if you're outside of the rain areas, it's going to get hot and muggy, say mid 90s, mid to upper 90s for your heat index each day. But you will get a little bit of a reprieve if you happen to get some rain in the area, knock it back down to upper 70s to 80s. Tropics are somewhat active right now. We're in July. We're still a ways off to the peak of the season. July is typically a little bit of a lull period, but we do have one name system out there in the Atlantic, and we're also watching a suspect area in the Gulf Coast. So we'll talk about that when we get to the tropic slide. Right now, here's our satellite imagery for the area this morning. You can see there's some clearing around the New Orleans metro area and closer to Baton Rouge. There's a big gap there, but there's some lurking clouds around the thunderstorm complex that's off the Gulf Coast, south of Lake Charles right now. That's with the weather that moved through our area yesterday. It has since pushed off the coast and now heading towards the Texas coast. That'll be their problem later on today. Closer to home, as we see some of these clouds erode, and there is a little bit of fog lurking about from yesterday's rainfall across the area, as all that burns off, we'll start seeing some additional showers and thunderstorms developing with daytime heating. Closer in, we can see there is some thunderstorms also forming in Terrebonne Parish near the Houma, Chauvin, Montague area, and those are moving to the south, generally speaking, and they'll be moving off the coast here in about an hour. And then we'll start seeing more developments over inland areas as the day wears on with daytime heating. Currently, there are no watches and warnings in effect, and all rivers currently are in good shape. They've gone below flood and have some capacity to hold some water at this time, so that's a good thing. Here's our tropic slide. You can see it. We have Tropical Depression 5, which was named yesterday, midway between the Bahamas and Bermuda, and it's racing rather quickly. This morning we find that just north of Bermuda, and the forecast is for it to go northeast, continue on and to move harmlessly towards the northeast. But we also watching this area of disturbed weather that's right along our coast itself. There's a lingering boundary of sorts, a weakness in the pressure pattern that's right along the Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida coast right now. And it's just lurking there, but the longer it mulls and the longer it has a chance to fester, it has a chance to possibly take on some tropical characteristics in time. Right now, we don't think it's going to happen in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a 10% chance of development over the next 2 days, but as it crosses over Florida and into the warmer Gulf Stream waters off the eastern seaboard, then it has a slightly better chance of becoming something a little more formidable. So with that, there's a 30% chance of development over the next 5 days. Here's Tropical Depression 5, the track, and as you see, harmlessly moving towards the northeast, no impacts to the Gulf of Mexico. And then right now, we don't have any guidance or any track forecast just yet for the suspect area in the Gulf. But as you see, it's not going to be much of an impact in the Gulf of Mexico either. It's mainly going to be in the Atlantic system if it does develop at all. So here's a severe weather outlook for today. We have a general outlook, general thunder, which means non-severe. But any storms that do develop will have some microburst potential. You can see some gusts 25 to 35 miles an hour from these storms. Brief heavy rainfall, and occasional to frequent lightning. So that's the main thing. We're in a holiday weekend. Many people are out doing outdoor things. So just be mindful of that. And if you hear thunder, please hurry up and get indoors because you don't want to run that risk of playing with lightning. Excessive rainfall outlook for today. That has been the trend for the past few days. And once again, it's a marginal risk, meaning that not a widespread flood event is expected to occur, but you can have these localized pockets of heavier rainfall. Generally speaking, we're looking at ½ inch or less of rainfall on an average across most of the area. But we have seen past several days that one or two places picks up multiple inches of rainfall, and that could be indeed be the case again today. And the highest threat will be this afternoon into early this evening. Excessive rainfall outlook for Monday, for tomorrow. Once again, there is a marginal risk, mainly across the Florida parishes of Louisiana and southern Mississippi. South Shore, not as much. Once again, we can see localized pockets of heavier rainfall that could lead to some localized flooding. So the rainfall forecast for today, we're looking at generally ½ inch for most of the area, but you can see some pockets of heavier amounts that are in multiple inches, say 2 to 3 inches. Some localized places may see as much as 3 to 4 inches today. But again, that's not going to be the rule. It's going to be more the exception. Tomorrow, Monday, looking once again at a quarter to a ½ inch of rain, generally speaking, across the area. But you can have some pockets in excess of 1 inch in some locations. For your storm total, when you add it all up, say between now and Wednesday morning, we should see some average rainfall amounts generally across the area of 1 to 3 inches, but locally higher pockets up to 6 inches. We've had a couple of locations over the past few days that had similar outcomes. We've had DeSalmons on Friday where they've had 6 inches of rain in a rather short time and had some flooding in that area. And then yesterday we saw near Poplarville, just east of Poplarville, about 5 or 6 inches of rain fell there, and potentially had some flooding in that area as well. That was a very remote rural area, so we didn't get many reports, but suffice it to say, I bet you they had some issues with some water ponding in that area just east of Poplarville. So where it will happen today is very difficult to say. And again, tomorrow there could be another pocket or two that sees some excessive rainfall. Our river forecast, as you see, a lot of green dots on the map. That's a good thing. That means nothing's in flood. Currently speaking, we do have the Red River Landing, which has just come out of flood about a week or so ago. It's still at an elevated level, but not flooding at this point, and it's working its way down as we speak. So that's a good thing. So in summary, we're in a weather than average pattern right now, the first part of this week, but we'll be trending more towards a typical rainfall pattern, say Wednesday onward into next weekend. Heat indices, we are in the summer, so heat is always going to be a concern. So we're looking at mid-90s, mid to upper 90s heat indices until you get some rain relief, and that cools it back down. And then we are watching the tropics. Once again, we have Tropical Depression 5, not affecting the Gulf of Mexico, it's staying out in the Atlantic, and we're watching the suspect area along the Gulf Coast area and see what happens with it once it moves into the Atlantic. So that's all we have for right now. We hope you have a safe and pleasant week ahead, and stay safe, and we'll see you next week.